I will cancel your engagement.
Joseon was shocked, but then overwhelmed with joy as she leapt into her father's arms, calling out, "Father," gently stroking her head. He teased, "You silly girl, you need to maintain your dignity as a princess." After leaving the princess's residence, the prince and the queen walked side by side, talking. "Is this really all right?" he asked. "What do you mean?" she inquired. "The matter of Youngsu's marriage, they'll be relieved to have one less thing to worry about. Besides, Youngsu is still young. It's good to keep her close to us for a little longer." The prince nodded thoughtfully. "Actually, earlier tonight, I dozed off for a while and had a strange dream." "What kind of dream?" she asked. "A terrifying nightmare. In the dream, Youngsu died from an illness. I was heartbroken, and even after waking, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. It took quite some time for me to distinguish between dream and reality. Only then did I finally calm down. Perhaps I still lack the courage to marry off my daughter." The next morning, at the Chancellery, His Highness was attentively reading the memorials. His face furrowed in silence. The official stood below, lining both sides, waiting. After a while, he set the memorials aside and slowly began to criticize. "I've reviewed all of your proposals thoroughly. Though they are better than before, they are still not enough. Fan's proposal, in particular, completely fails to grasp the essence of the policy. Li Fan's proposal is too outdated. Lai Fan's proposal is all about the appearance. But the content is empty. As for the Grand Counselor and the Prime Minister, both of you will have to revise your work again." And just like that, time quickly passed, and it was already late afternoon. A few days later, the ministers gathered again, everyone exhausted, sighing deeply. The Chief Chancellor, presiding over the meeting, remarked, "Everyone looks so worn out." The Deputy Chancellor, with dark circles under his eyes and a weary expression, responded, "Since that afternoon, we've been staying up all night, thinking and preparing meticulously. Yet our efforts were dismissed so easily." The Chief Chancellor continued. "In reality, we all know what His Majesty wants, don't we? The specialized trading policy is essentially meant to prevent monopolies in the production and sale of certain goods. However, local aristocrats and officials have taken advantage of this, colluding with merchants to monopolize the market and exploit the people's labor. His Majesty wants to break this vicious cycle. Then, what if we send officials from the Treasury Department to directly oversee it?" Hearing this, everyone was astonished, eyes wide and mouths agape. The Treasury Department? With only 8 circuits? The Deputy Chancellor stroked his beard and suggested, "If we are to manage specialized trading, we must at least send someone to every protectorate." One official objected. "The protectorates? There are far more than just 1 or 2. If we do that, the Treasury Department will be left empty." Frustrated, the Chief Chancellor slammed the table. "Then what should we do now? If we entrust this to commoners, we'll be dismissed from our posts. If we're not dismissed, we should count ourselves lucky." With that, they all fell into a moment of silence. Until the Left Chancellor suddenly spoke up. "I have a plan." Meanwhile, in another corner, Liu stood there, filled with murderous intent. His lifeless eyes stared blankly as he thought to himself. "My name is Liu, Prince of the Yashin Dynasty." His hands clenched tightly, trembling. "After 3 years in the palace, this is the most dangerous moment I've faced," he thought to himself. Ihian approached with a bright smile and asked, "Brother, did you sleep well last night?" Seeing no response from him, Jiangsu walked over from another direction and asked, "Why are you standing there in a daze? Don't you greet your elder brother and sister?" Only then did he snap out of his trance, startled, and hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, elder brother and sister. Did you sleep well last night?" Suddenly, Yang-su turned to Ihian, causing him to flinch, and asked, "By the way, Hian, has you been causing you any trouble lately?" Ihian hesitated for a moment, then patted his shoulder warmly, smiling. "Not at all. Lately, he's been improving in his studies. Just the other day, I even saw him diligently studying. Make sure to teach me some of those sword techniques later." "Okay?" Yu obediently replied, much to everyone's surprise. "Yes, elder brother. I will." Satisfied, Yang-su changed the topic. "Hian, you're attending court today, aren't you? You'd better hurry or you'll be late." Ihian smiled and replied, "Since my engagement has been cancelled, I'll be visiting you more often. But now, I must excuse myself." "Do well, little brother." With that, he left, leaving only 2 people behind. Yang Su threw his arm over Li Yu's shoulder, making him tremble in fear. It's been a while. Spend some time with me, will you? At the court session, His Highness spoke up. The Treasury Department will manage monopolized trade directly? If we do that, the department will be left empty. The left chancellor, extremely drowsy, yet still standing, responded with his eyes half closed. That's correct, Your Highness. To make up for the manpower shortage, we suggest holding a recruitment exam. After speaking, he glanced up, feeling pleased with himself. Thinking that this should be enough to satisfy His Highness. His Highness rested his chin in thought for a while. It's still lacking, isn't it? It's not quite enough, he said. He turned to ask Yi Herong for his opinion. What do you think, Crown Prince? Yi Herong replied, I believe it's a good proposal. But it will require a lot of time and resources. However, if we recruit Confucian scholars from Sunggungwon, Royal Confucian Academy, I think we can address this issue. His Highness asked again, Confucian scholars from Sunggungwon? The left chancellor seemed slightly alarmed and said, Your Highness, while the Crown Prince's suggestion is reasonable, the scholars at Sunggungwon have not yet passed any major exams. They are still newcomers. If we place these people in official positions, it's no different from handing official hats to the incompetent. Yi Herong defended his point to the end. The scholars at Sunggungwon also take exams every month, do they not? Furthermore, their results are clearly ranked. If we select those with outstanding performance from the recent months, there is a high chance they will pass the state exams later. Those who pass the state exams will become excellent officials with practical experience. And even if they do not pass, they will still be dedicated civil servants managing the budget effectively. Hearing this, His Highness smiled to himself, thinking, well said, he truly is my son. Then he sternly asked the Prime Minister, what is your opinion? The left chancellor, powerless to disagree, replied, I believe the Crown Prince's words are very reasonable, Your Highness. With that, His Highness loudly ordered, send the command to Sunggungwon to supplement the Treasury Department with manpower and establish monopolized trading agencies under the Treasury. At least down to the district level. We obey Your Highness's command. That evening, at someone's residence, two people were pouring each other drinks, seemingly preparing for a heavy night of drinking. The left chancellor and the chief chancellor raised their cups of Goryeo wine. Even if we drink ourselves into oblivion and can't get up tomorrow, we must drink to our heart's content tonight. You're absolutely right, said the left chancellor. Dejected, serving under the great King Taejo. I've never felt so disheartened as I do today. The chief chancellor laughed loudly and mocked him. Are you talking about the days when you were dismissed from office so often? It was like a daily meal. Exactly. After this afternoon, just looking at His Highness's eyes gave me the feeling I could hear his voice. Is this the best you can do? You're still worse than my son. And with that, the two of them, both fuming, shouted in unison, that cursed father and son. The next morning, many officials were pacing back and forth in the main hall. The left chancellor approached the chief chancellor with a confused look on his face. Minister, today is not a court meeting, but just a regular session. Why are there so many officials present? The Prime Minister, still reeking of alcohol, apologized. Forgive me. After you left last night, I drank another round, so you haven't heard then, replied the chief chancellor. Today, there's an imperial edict requiring all officials of the rank of grade 2 and above to attend court. Something urgent must be happening. The court session soon began, and His Highness addressed the gathered officials. The reason I've urgently summoned you all is because last night, I received an emergency message from the Ming court. Yi Xiang was momentarily surprised and thought to himself, from the Ming court? What could have happened at this time? It is the third emperor of the Ming dynasty, Emperor Yanla, who has passed away, His Highness said pensively. He then asked, do any of you know anything about the prince who has ascended to the throne? In response, there was only silence from the gathered officials. Frustrated, he held his head and exclaimed, oh heavens, how ignorant you all are. Seeing that no one had an answer, he didn't press them further and instead issued an order. All right, then, you must immediately organize a delegation to attend the funeral. In the morning delegation, find and include someone skilled in divination and a master of geomancy as soon as possible. Understood, Your Highness, they replied. After the court session ended, Yi Xiang sat in a corner, resting his chin on his hand. Thinking, so what will happen to the Ming now? Our relationship with them isn't that bad. Why doesn't Kim Jinho study history more diligently? Suddenly, the eunuch came running in a hurry, repeatedly calling, Crown Prince. Yi Xiang frowned and said, "Eunuch, you shouldn't run in the workshop. It's dangerous for my equipment." The eunuch leaned in close to his ear and whispered, "Your Highness." "The matter is," Yi Xiang, curious, interrupted, teasing. "Huh? What? I haven't even told you what I'm going to say. And you're already reacting." The eunuch smiled, realizing the jest. "I was just trying it out in advance." Yi Xiang chuckled, but the eunuch continued, "Your Highness. His Majesty is in the next room." Yi Xiang was genuinely surprised this time. "What? Really?" He opened the door with a smile and asked, "Father, what brings you here?" "You little brat, am I not allowed to come here?" "It's just that your visit was so sudden." "I was a bit surprised," Yi Xiang replied. The two then entered the room, sat down, and began talking. "Xiang, you're planning to search for books during the delegation's visit, aren't you?" his father asked. "Yes, father. Although this trip isn't for the best reasons, I won't miss this opportunity. Plus, once the Asen library is completed, finding books won't be such a hassle anymore," Yi Xiang added. His father rummaged through his sleeve and said, "Well then, take this." He handed Yi Xiang a piece of paper and instructed, "Bring back the books related to this topic." "Understood, father." Yi Xiang opened the paper and looked at it, then glanced back at his father. "But if these are books, can't you simply order the officials in the delegation to acquire them?" His father clicked his tongue and replied, "If I did that, they would all cry and beg for mercy." Yi Xiang opened the paper fully and was taken aback by its contents. He quickly turned to his father and asked in disbelief, "Father, is this?" His father nodded and confirmed, "That's right, they are all books on phonology." Yi Xiang's face turned red as he thought, "Phonology? No way." He hesitated, then nervously asked, "Father, can you tell me why you're seeking these books?" His Highness sighed softly and then replied, "I'm disappointed. The people in the palace are all fools. Even when it's necessary to replace them. It's not easy here in Roshin. The examinations also have their limitations. There may be many intelligent individuals. But surely, there are still one or two who, even until their death, do not understand these Chinese characters. If we could create letters that even people like them could read, wouldn't we be able to discover more talented individuals?" Yi Xiang, still puzzled, asked, "But why phonology?" His Highness explained, "All the letters in the books from the West are letters that represent sounds. And I also believe that letters representing sounds will be easier to learn." After hearing this, Yi Xiang thought to himself, "This will change the course of history." Then he said aloud, "Father, I will follow your will. I will make sure the envoys prioritize this list of books." Meanwhile, at Songyangguan, Yi Inzwan was running across the courtyard, shouting, "Brother Kim, where are you? Brother Kim? Scholar Kim Inzwan, where are you?" Kim Inzwan, who was lazily lying on a tree branch, responded, "Good heavens, I'm not a cuckoo bird. But the noise you're making is enough to kill me." Yi Inzwan, surprised, looked up and said, "Oh, there you are. Why didn't you come this morning? There's a new decree. And it's really amazing." Kim Inzwan jumped down from the tree, visibly disheartened, and said, "It doesn't matter. I'm quitting my studies and returning to my hometown." Yi Inzwan, confused, asked, "Why are you going home? You've always competed for the top spot." As Kim Inzwan dusted off his clothes, he replied, "Even if I rank first in the exam, it's useless. You know what? I'm 26 years old this year, and my first child is already 6. But I still can't even pass the small exams, let alone the big ones. It's been 8 years since I first sat for the small exam. Do you know what happened?" Suddenly, he recalled. "The ink bottle broke. I hurriedly took out my spare. But that was defective, too. So even the spare bottle broke. And in the end, I couldn't write on half of the paper. 5 years ago, during the second exam, I was hit on the head and fainted on my way to the test. By the time I woke up, the exam was already over. And during the third exam, I was quarantined because of dysentery and couldn't attend." At court, His Highness spoke up. 103 students? I was informed that Sunkyunkwan has 150. What about the rest? Did they not register? The Minister of Personnel nervously responded. "Yes, Your Highness. That is correct. Is there any reason for this?" His Highness asked. The minister hesitated and then replied. Some study at Sunkyunkwan out of obligation. Hearing this, His Highness became angry. What? He exclaimed. The minister, frightened, bowed deeply and respectfully said. Your Highness. His Highness furiously interrupted. How is this respectful? Those who want to work in the court and yet have such narrow-minded views. How can that be? The left chancellor tried to defend the minister, saying, he doesn't have much experience. But before he could finish, His Highness slammed the table and shouted. Nonsense. A broad or narrow perspective has nothing to do with experience. It's a matter of competence. How can the court be filled with people like this? The left chancellor immediately bowed and begged for forgiveness. Your Highness. I misspoke. Please pardon my words. His Highness was still furious, thinking to himself. How could my father employ someone like this? After a brief sigh, he asked the Minister of Personnel. What do you plan for the future? The minister, flustered, replied. Well, first of all, I will provide education programs on industry and commerce for the students of Sunkyunkwan within 3 months. In the meantime, I will also start producing sugar reserves and establish a monopoly system. His Highness asked. Appropriate. But it seems each level will lack manpower according to the personnel plan. How do you intend to resolve this issue? The minister, sweating profusely, answered. I will select officials who have been evaluated for good job performance. After reviewing their work for a certain period, I will decide whether to promote or demote them. His Highness, stroking his chin in thought, said. All right. When making announcements, did you state that they must serve for at least 1 year? The minister replied. Yes. Your Highness. Because of the possibility of corruption, I will not allow them to work in one area for more than 2 years. His Highness silently praised him, thinking, this minister has come up with a good idea. Then he said aloud. All right. The Sunkyunkwan students have filled the vacancies left by other officials. The Minister of Personnel immediately responded. Yes. Your Highness. First, we will fill the gaps by promoting existing officials. The students of Sunkyunkwan will be assigned tasks based on their exam scores during their training period. His Highness continued asking. How do you plan to promote these students? The Minister of Personnel, feeling powerless, responded. We'll start from rank 9 and gradually move up to rank 7. His Highness thought for a moment and asked. Rank 7? Increase it to rank 6. Startled, the minister quickly replied. Yes. Yes. Your Highness. Then, remembering something, he asked. But, Your Highness, is this really feasible? The civil service exams don't recruit that many scholars. Do you intend to accomplish this within such a short time? His Highness tapped his fingers on the memorials, deep in thought for a moment, and then ordered. Yes. Increase it to rank 6. And proceed with Bachio's plan. Understood. Your Highness. Thus, the recruitment process for the Ministry of Personnel began. When Kim In-seon and In-seon joined, they were surprised and exclaimed. Rank 6? Really? The recruiter replied. Yes. If you work diligently as officials in the Ministry of Personnel, you'll have the chance to be promoted to a rank equivalent to the top civil service exam without having to go through the major state exam. Hearing this, the two of them burst into tears of joy and hugged each other. Scholar In-seon said. Thank you for telling me, brother. I want to study with Scholar Kim In-seon too. Kim In-seon, overjoyed, thought to himself. A glimmer of hope has arrived for someone like me with such an unfortunate childhood. Just holding a position in the court would be enough to make me happy. And now, I could even reach rank 6. Thinking of this, he shouted in excitement. Long live His Majesty. I will devote myself completely at the Eastern Palace. Yi Hyang, after hearing His Highness's words, joyfully asked. Is that so? If that's the case, then even scholars who haven't passed the exams will have hope. He looked at the tea in his hands and thought. It's similar to being an intern. Keep going. And these interns will become full-time employees. His Highness laughed and said. All right. Bachio's stubbornness has resulted in a good plan. They'll be paid according to their ranks and rewarded based on their abilities. Yi Hyang smiled and praised. Thanks to Father's grace, the scholars have been studying very diligently. Hearing this, His Highness laughed heartily. You cheeky boy. You're good at flattering me. Yi Hyang looked at him and replied. I'm being sincere, Father. And I'm truly happy that you came here to tell me this in person. His Highness, with a gentle smile, said. This policy wouldn't have been possible without your efforts. At the very least, I should do this. Then, he asked. How much longer until you turn 15? Yi Hyang replied. 4 more years, Father. His Highness sighed deeply. My time still has a long way to go. I wish time would pass more quickly. 3 months later, Kim In-seon excitedly thought to himself. Just yesterday I was a Sunki-Unkwan scholar. And now I become an official of the Ministry of Personnel. Though it's only a trial position for now. This is the first step toward becoming a true rank 6 official. From inside the room, the figure of Kim In-seon emerged. As he walked, he thought. Not long ago, I was still a scholar at Sunki-Unkwan. But today, I am a 7th class provisional official. Your Highness, I, Kim In-seon, pledge my wholehearted service. He said as he clenched his fists, feeling on the verge of tears. The last 3 months had truly been a storm. Especially with the subjects of commerce and mathematics. Out of the 103 participants in the final exam, only 20 had passed. The rest were sent back to Sunki-Unkwan. Suddenly, Yi In-seon called out cheerfully. Brother Kim, hurry up. We're going to be late for the court session. Right, let's go. The two chatted as they walked. Brother Yi, have you also been assigned to the Ministry of Personnel? Yes, though my rank is lower than yours. I've also been temporarily appointed as a registrar. Yi replied with a smile. They both shouted joyfully. That's fantastic. Let's hurry before we're late. Together, we'll take our first steps toward becoming full-fledged officials. Nearby, a group of eunuchs, busy sweeping the area, watched the excited scholars with envy. If only we had registered. One said wistfully. Well, their rank isn't that high. Another replied. I heard that even the top exam scorer was only appointed to a provisional 7th class rank. But if they're evaluated well, they could be promoted to a true 6th class rank by next year. Ha, easier said than done. They still have to compete with the other officials. Exactly. For a man, the real goal should be to pass the imperial examination and become a top-ranking scholar. Meanwhile, at the office of the Ministry of Personnel, a man with dark circles under his eyes approached, holding a stack of documents. He handed them to the Minister of Personnel, saying, Sir, these are the figures you requested. This is the list of regions where the population has increased significantly since the last census. You've worked hard, the minister said as he opened the documents. But as he read through the list, his face turned bewildered. Why are there so many? This area is incredibly overpopulated. Wait, this other area too? These scoundrels no longer fear heaven or earth. Suddenly, the minister was reminded of a nightmare he had had. One that had started when the Crown Prince initiated the smallpox vaccination program. After the Chief Chancellor, the Deputy Chancellor, and the Censor-in-Chief were dismissed shortly afterward. He recalled when His Highness had entrusted him with a task. Conduct a census of the capital to ensure that the smallpox vaccination is carried out efficiently. Collaborate with the Census Bureau and the SAMSA office to expedite the process. Outwardly, he replied obediently. But in his mind, he was thinking something quite different. I follow your command, but conducting the census is a routine task. So I didn't expect there would be any major issues until I saw the report results. At that time, His Highness held up the report and said, Am I becoming senile? Or are the common people focused more on having children than working? After Johnson founded the country, the population was scarce. And that small population was exhausted by the exploitation of the nobility. So, I reduced taxes. Of course, since I reduced taxes, I had to tighten spending. And even the stipends for the royal family and officials were cut. He then stood up angrily and shouted. But look, the actual population is much larger than what's recorded in the census. Yet the tax revenue remains low. Why is the treasury receiving so little tax? While the people are still trapped in poverty? His anger grew as he continued. And he ripped the paper in his hand. Why aren't any of you saying anything? Isn't it obvious? Who else could be responsible if not the bureaucrats? The very same officials that you constantly protect. Everyone present was left speechless. Mao Zedong, both shocked and frightened, still furious. His Highness thundered. I've considered your contributions, which is why I increased your stipends and the new policy.
And this is how you repay my kindness?
All the officials could do was bow deeply, acknowledging their fault. We deserve to be punished. His Highness commanded.
Immediately create an accurate census and land registry.
Yes, Your Highness, they all replied, obeying his order. Reflecting on it, the Minister of Personnel sat trembling as he recorded the numbers in the ledgers. Just remembering it is enough to send chills down my spine, he thought. From that moment on, the battle with the numbers began. Inside the office, people were animatedly discussing. The population of this area has increased 8-fold.
What? Did you read that carefully? Who is in charge of this region? Find out who the magistrate of this area is.
Suddenly, someone rushed in from outside to report.
Sir, someone has finally arrived.
Hearing this, the Minister of Personnel exclaimed.
That's music to my ears.
Overjoyed, he hurried outside to meet the newcomers. Please, bring them in, I'm so glad to see you.
Kim In-seon and Lee In-seon were both surprised. Thinking, the Minister of Personnel himself is coming to greet us? Kim In-seon quickly greeted him. Hello, we are scholars sent from Sunggung-won to assist the Ministry of Personnel. We are ready to do any task you assign us.
The Minister of Personnel, hearing this, happily said to the person beside him.
Did you hear that clearly?
Yes, sir,
came the response. Each of you will be assigned to a mentor to guide you in your work.
Thus, Kim In-seon and Lee In-seon were led inside.
You two can sit here.
Yes, sir, right here?
Exactly, that's your spot.
Two officials, with dark circles under their eyes, appeared carrying 2 large stacks of thick documents.
Welcome, juniors, apologies for the inconvenience.
But here is the pile of documents that need to be processed today.
Kim In-seon felt completely overwhelmed by the sight.
Later that evening, the voice of the chief attendant echoed through the halls.
Your Majesty, the Minister of Personnel requests an audience.
Let him in, His Highness replied. When asked what was going on, the Minister of Personnel knelt on the ground and reported.
The census is nearing completion, Your Highness.
However, there are some matters I wish to discuss before presenting the final report.
During the compilation of the household registry,
I discovered some regions with unusually large population increases. Inside, the minister was internally screaming. It's those vermin who have caused this.
Please, Your Majesty, eradicate their entire clan.
His Highness reviewed the report, gritting his teeth in anger. 5 times, 8 times the increase, this is a serious problem.
He then turned and commanded. Summon the chief attendant at once.
Yes, Your Majesty. You listen carefully, His Highness continued. Immediately mobilize the investigative council and military officers to inspect these areas. If the local officials do not cooperate, they are authorized to use force.
In a remote forested area,
the sound of galloping horses echoed as a group of riders sped through the woods.
Investigate thoroughly and swiftly.
We obey, Your Highness. Someone's eyes fluttered open briefly before closing again. Suddenly, they shot wide open.
Kim In-seon awoke with a start.
His eyes wide and his mouth agape.
I'm late, he shouted.
The other officials nearby looked at him, startled by his outburst. And Lee In-seon, seated next to him, was so shocked that he nearly fell backward. One of the older officials, with a dark expression, laughed and said,
Don't worry, Junior, as long as you haven't left yet. It's not officially late. Kim In-seon, still dazed, responded weakly. Yes. And so, another night fell. Kim In-seon dragged himself home.
And as soon as he walked in, he collapsed onto the floor. Utterly exhausted, he thought to himself. 4 more days until I'm done with this shift. I'm so tired.
The next morning, at the Ministry of Personnel's office,
the officials once again prepared for a new day of work.
Kim In-seon and Lee In-seon were utterly exhausted.
Their faces pale and weary as they trudged forward. They glanced at their workplace ahead and sighed in frustration.
Suddenly, Lord Bayate approached them from behind. Smiling as he said, I feel like I can hear your inner thoughts. Kim In-seon quickly greeted him. Lord Bayate. You're up already? He asked them. How long have you been working here now? It's been half a month already.
Sir.
The chief official whispered quietly to the magistrate. Do you remember the case in Hanyang? Where the smallpox cases were discovered? The magistrate nodded. Yes. I remember. The chief continued. It was the SA Hanbiu who conducted the investigation and found the irregularities in the population. The magistrate furrowed his brows. But what does that have to do with us? The chief's eyes widened as he raised his voice. Not related? It's very much related to us. Suddenly, Judge Choi rushed over, calling for the magistrate. Magistrate! Magistrate! The magistrate immediately stood up. Judge Choi. I was just about to summon you. As Judge Choi approached, he said, I saw that the Federal Bureau was there. Have they reported to you yet? We need to come up with a solution quickly. The magistrate waved his hand, signaling Judge Choi to enter the room. Come inside and tell me about the Federal Bureau. Don't let anyone else in. Yes, sir. Choi responded. Once inside, Judge Choi began. I've heard that many people from Chungcheong province have moved to Hanyang. The magistrate, visibly annoyed, asked. Do you have any other suggestions? Judge Choi responded. I am currently conducting inspections across all 8 provinces in Osun. So we still have some time. In the meantime, we need to submit a formal explanation. We must justify why the population has increased so quickly. The magistrate, considering Choi's words, asked. Do you have any good solutions? Judge Choi offered his idea. First of all, the number of slaves pretending to be commoners is on the rise. And smallpox has spread into our district. Thanks to the treatments I provided, the population has increased. The magistrate smiled, clapping his hands in approval. Ah, that's a good idea. And if that doesn't work, I'll just blame it on my wife's second cousin's neighbor. Ryo Young Hyun, the Grand Inspector. I'll take care of everything. So don't worry. He then burst into a hearty laugh. My connections are excellent, aren't they? Judge Choi, however, could only think to himself. He's gone too far this time. Elsewhere, a group of people gathered to discuss something. Kim Hung. How are you preparing for me all sunright? Oh, that, Kim replied. I still have to prepare drinks, food, and all sorts of things. It's going to take a while. And since the reward day is still far off, the cost is also a big issue. Another person, with a flushed face, raised his hand and touched his face, saying, it would be quite unfilial to talk to my parents about this. Kim In-seon rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said. People say that if we don't organize the Me All Sunrise, life at the government office will become tough. Suddenly, someone came running over, shouting. Hey, there's a lot of work to do. What are you all doing? Oh, yes, we'll get started right away. They replied. Kim In-seon, carrying some items into the government office, called out. The great inspector has come again. Both men looked at each other, utterly exhausted. The senior official sighed and said. Another report, damn it, where is it from this time? Kim In-seon answered, it's from Jeonju. Jeonju. As Kim In-seon was leaving, he bumped into someone else. After exchanging greetings, the man scolded him. You sure like to joke, don't you, newcomer? Kim In-seon, embarrassed, quickly apologized. I'm sorry, sir. The man handed him a stack of books and said. Don't worry, just take your time. Here, take this first, I was just about to bring it to you. It's a report on population growth from the 8 provinces across the country. After classifying it by region, compare it with the census report and find any anomalies by today. With that, the man turned and left. Elsewhere, Kim In-song was discussing something with another person. I prepared well for you guys. But what about the costs? The other man explained. If you marry multiple matchmakers, then you'll get it for free. Kim In-seon immediately raised both hands, stepping back in refusal. No way. I already have a wife and kids. Lee In-song, standing beside him, added. As for me, I can't make that decision either. The other man pointed his finger at them greedily. Then give me 30% of your rewards for the next 2 years. Lee In-song slammed his hand on the table and shouted. That's way too much. 30% is outrageous. But the man turned away, ignoring them, and said. Then handle it yourselves. I don't know if you realize this. But if Me All Sunrise isn't done right, you could lose your position. Kim In-song was surprised when he heard this. This is my first year in office, 30% is way too much. I also need to buy a house for my wife and kids back in the countryside. Although he didn't like it, the man had no choice but to reduce the price. Alright, I'll lower it to 20% for you. In-song looked at Kim In-song in disbelief and said. Brother Kim, I think we should carefully reconsider this decision. We should also discuss it with our peers. Kim In-song shook his head. No need, don't you see? Our superiors are bullying us over this. Besides, isn't it better to get this done as soon as possible? And don't worry about the cost. I'll take care of it since I'm your elder brother. The man handed them 2 contracts. Sign here, and the contract will be valid. Both of them signed the contracts and said, We'll leave everything in your hands. The man escorted them out, saying, Don't worry. In 5 days, I'll send someone to the government office. I'll meet you there. Just wait for the news. As they walked away, a figure emerged behind the man. Did you make a good haul this time? The new figure asked. My pockets always get full when new people arrive. The man replied with a grin. Don't worry, I'll make sure to give you your share. Just make sure everything is arranged properly. The figure, fanning himself, asked, By the way, did you stir them up nicely? The man looked surprised. What? I didn't disturb them at all. 5 days later, at Injeonsan Seongjo, everyone was gathered. Singing and dancing joyfully. Everyone was laughing and having a good time. Meanwhile, Kim In-song was being held down by a group of people who tied his hands and drew on his face. Elsewhere, In-song and another person not only had their faces drawn on but were also treated like cattle. With people riding on their backs. Another group was forced to drink water from smelly shoes and then pushed into a pond. The next morning, after hearing the news, the senior official's hand trembled. And he dropped his pen. What? They organized meal sunrise? How many people were there? A subordinate, bowing, responded. It said there were more than 20 people. The senior official, furious, slammed his hand on the table and shouted. Are they insane? Summon everyone to the courtyard. Now, once outside, he bellowed. Are you all crazy? Even if it's a custom, the imperial court's orders are more important. Don't you know the prince forbade any banquets? Everyone there was left with their mouths open in shock and sheer terror. A man dressed in purple leaned close to Kim In-song and whispered. He's just threatening us a few days of repentance. And it'll be over. Meanwhile, the prince was burning with fury. These people are so audacious. The senior official trembled with fear, knowing how enraged the prince would be. He addressed everyone present. No matter how busy Sahanbiyu is, this matter won't be overlooked. It will surely reach the prince's ears. Back with the prince, he furrowed his brow and called for the Thuang Tien officer. The officer entered, bowing low. Yes, your highness. Dae-sun? No, it's not Dae-sun. Dae-sun is the head of Sahanbiyu. Meanwhile, the senior official continued scolding. All of you will be placed under strict supervision. Don't trouble me anymore. Get out of here. Immediately. Back with the prince, his expression was filled with anger as he began issuing orders. Summon Panui Kampu at once. The man in purple, still whispering to Kim In-song, smirked. See, I told you. Use this chance to rest for a few days. Suddenly, they heard a noise, and both turned to see an entire squad of soldiers approaching. Holding batons, they were soldiers under the command of the House of Ui Kampu. The group was confused, while the senior official turned pale. Stammering, the House of Ui Kampu. The commander of the Ui Kampu soldiers raised his baton and shouted. This is the prince's order. Arrest everyone who dared to organize the Miao Sunrite. Surrender quietly. In front of the dungeon. 2 guards stood watch. Strictly guarding the entrance. Everyone was thrown into the cells. Trembling and weeping. One person muttered. I've heard that if you're sent to Ui Kampu, you'll never return. Kim In-song cried until he had no tears left. Screaming for justice. I'm innocent. Please. Listen to me. I just joined. I didn't know anything. Another person shouted. Prime Minister Lee Sin and Chief Eunuch Lyric are my cousins. Please let me explain. I beg you. In the royal court. The ministers were all kneeling and begging the prince for mercy. The senior official hesitantly spoke. Your Highness. We hope you can calm your anger. They made a grave mistake. But the conditions in Ui Kampu are too harsh. The prince frowned and replied. Last year. I issued a ban on this custom and punished anyone who broke it. Isn't punishing them like this still not enough? I won't let them off easily this time. Basio, the chief official, also spoke on their behalf. But, Your Highness, this time the officials dispatched to the provinces have done so on a scale never before seen. Those who participated in the Miao Sunrise are all scholars of Shanxian. Despite his words, the prince remained furious. That's exactly what angers me even more. How dare these newcomers blatantly disregard my orders? The left senior official also pleaded. Your Highness, forgive me for speaking out. But the purpose of Miao Sunrise is to prevent the oppression of these new officials by senior officials and to build relationships between the old and new members. It has both benefits and drawbacks. So it's difficult to eradicate it overnight. Therefore, I humbly ask for your leniency this time. The prince, seeming to calm down, replied. You make a fine point. Building relationships between the upper and lower ranks. You say? Then let me ask you. Who exactly is above them? The left senior official hesitated. Above them are the minor officials. Then the left minister and. Hearing this, the prince's anger flared up once again as he shouted. That's right. They only fear those in the 5th and 6th ranks. Don't they? Is that all you have to say? You dare seek favors from the court like this? The left senior official bowed deeply, apologizing. Your Highness, I have made a grave mistake. I only sought your forgiveness for those foolish newcomers. The prince stood and yelled. I do not want to hear it. All these newly appointed officials ignored my orders. This is the perfect opportunity to weed out these rotten seeds and reform our government system. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. Your Highness, Huang Tian, I must speak with the king directly. Prince Yi Hyung stood outside the door and said, Your son wishes to discuss the punishment for those who have troubled you. The prince, calming down, sat back down and replied, Of course. Speak before the grand ministers. The door opened slightly, and Yi Hyung smiled as he stepped in. Then why not assign the task to those who had time to organize the meal sunright? The prince, pleased with the idea, responded. Yes. That is an excellent suggestion. Yi Hyung, the last task I assigned to you. How long did it take to complete? 5 years. Was it? The prince then addressed all those present. I will give you all 1 year. Everyone involved in this affair must be assigned work immediately. If it is not completed within that time, you will all face exile. The length of exile will be proportional to the amount of unfinished work. Hearing this, Bei Seo, the chief official, couldn't believe it. Exiled for that many years. For Atro. 3 years of exile for 3 parts unfinished. 1 year for 1 part. And 5 years for 5 parts? The prince continued. Moreover, 80% of their salary must be deducted during the time they perform this task. Your Highness, Yi Hyung knelt and asked. Father, what about isolating them and reducing their sentence to 1 year? The prince, with a serious expression, replied. Him? You still want to let them off so easily? Yi Hyung smiled and responded. Most of them didn't even know about the Myong Eri ban. If you pardon them this time, they could lead the effort to eradicate the MII on Eri practice. At this point, the prince calmed down and smiled. This sounds good. But 1 month is too short. I order that it be 3 months. Now, what are you all waiting for? Carry out the orders immediately. Yes. Your Highness. The next morning, all the people from the previous day were tied in rows, their heads covered, and led away. Move slowly. No rushing. Walk at a steady pace. A voice commanded. Kim In-seon, inside the hood, wondered. Where am I being taken? Does the Prime Minister even know my situation? A voice suddenly called out. The new official from the Ministry of Revenue. Sit down here. Kim In-seon was shocked. Am I hearing this right? He imagined himself being tortured in a chair. A chair? Am I about to be punished? In terror, he screamed. I confess.
I can't handle being crippled for the rest of my life. I'll admit everything. I colluded with merchants. I received 3 carts and a piece of cotton for each Mignonary group. I'll accept any punishment. Just go easy on me. As the hood was removed, he broke out in a cold sweat, realizing he was at the Ministry of Revenue. Everyone around him was staring at him in silence. Yi Hyang, surprised, remarked, "Well, this is interesting. Quite the confession to overhear." Barcello, the chief official, enraged, pointed at Kim and Seon and yelled, "You ungrateful wretch! Because we're distant relatives, I overlooked many of your transgressions. And this is how you repay me?" Yi Hyang, sensing the tension, quickly slipped away. "Oh dear. Calm down. Barcello. Please." A few days later at Gunfuk Palace, His Highness sat above, eating while speaking. "I know you have all worked very hard. So today, I have prepared something to comfort you." The officials, Basio and Grand Minister, looked downcast, wondering what he meant. Just a few days ago, he had scolded them. Meanwhile, the person sitting next to him happily clapped his hands and said, "Thank you very much, Your Highness." His Highness picked up his bowl and glanced at Grand Minister Cassio sitting below. "Very Okan. Don't you know my mood?" The man quickly understood and replied, "Yes, Your Highness. I don't know how to repay this favor." His Highness smiled again and said, "In order for the commoners to live in peace and prosperity, the court needs to offer a lot of support. First, I hope you can set aside the stress of work and enjoy this meal. We will obey Your Highness's orders today. Announce to the Ministry of Household. Have you organized the household registers yet? If you delay too much, you might face trouble. We must work together to get the tasks completed quickly. Also, check the stockpiles of salt and sugar and the tribute prices." Just reading that, Grand Minister Pacho almost coughed up blood. "I knew it. I want to resign." His Highness, along with Wai Herong and the other ministers, went for a walk. At that moment, Wai Herong exclaimed in surprise, "What? The officials and merchants are colluding with each other?" "Yes, Father. I believe this is a very serious matter." "You are right. You are right. The officials and merchants at the market must be punished severely." Suddenly, someone hurriedly ran over and called out to His Highness, "Your Highness. They've already entered the city." His Highness calmly turned back and said, "All right. I know. Calm down. Who has entered the city?" Both His Highness and Wai Herong smiled smugly. "Oh. They've arrived." "Have they?" "They must have arrived." Wai Herong said to His Highness, "Father, may I be excused to meet the officials accompanying the envoy delegation?" "Go ahead. I'll see you later." "Yes, Father." In the main hall, His Highness began to speak to the officials below. Traveling such a long distance must have been tiring. "You must be exhausted. Yet I've called you here. I'm truly sorry. But this matter is very important. So I hope you understand that I cannot delay it any longer." The envoy responded, "I do not dare to refuse. Your Highness. As a subject, this is my duty. Naturally." At that moment, His Highness pressed further. "So, how is their new emperor?" The envoy began to describe. "He seems to be a rather mild-tempered person. His voice is calm and steady, and his actions are full of grace and composure." His Highness asked, "And how do the officials in their court evaluate him?" The envoy continued, "Most of them speak highly of him. Your Highness. While the late emperor was absent due to military campaigns, he managed the country very effectively. Moreover, after ascending the throne, he swiftly completed the conquests that the late emperor left unfinished. He also declared that there would be no more major campaigns unless there was a justified reason." His Highness exhaled a breath of relief, closing one eye as he continued to ask, "That's good news. But where are the royal physician and the general who accompanied you? Bring them in." The royal physician and the general knelt down to pay their respects to His Highness.
Han Su, the humble physician of the Royal Medical Office, greets Your Majesty.
His Highness beckoned the two of them closer. They both responded in unison.
Yes, Your Highness. He then asked for their opinions about the new emperor. What do you think of the new emperor? Han Su hesitated. Well, first of all,
his demeanor is very impressive.
However,
his body seems quite heavy, which makes it somewhat difficult for him to sit on the throne.
It might be due to fatigue from mourning.
But I noticed that his eyes are clouded, and they show signs of redness and swelling.
Additionally, his complexion doesn't look very good.
He appears quite pale.
According to physiognomy, his fate with his siblings may not be harmonious. But his line of descendants looks promising. However,
the law line does not extend past the corners of his mouth, which may indicate a shortened lifespan.
After listening to this, His Highness spoke again. You've worked hard. You may take your leave now. Han Su bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude. Thank you, Your Majesty. His Highness then turned to the envoy and asked, So, you also believe that the new emperor's health is not in good condition? The envoy replied, Yes, Your Majesty.
I also noticed that his health seems rather unstable. It appears that he is struggling with severe obesity, and it seems to affect his breathing as well.
Upon hearing this,
His Highness recalled Wai Hurong's words and became thoughtful.
If this continues,
it may affect his mind.
If the emperor's health deteriorates, the kingdom could be in danger. If it weren't for Hurong, perhaps I would have ended up the same way.
All of these worries come from the concern that my son has for me.
He sighed and continued. That being said, if the delegation's observations are correct, the reign of this emperor might be shorter than expected. After thinking it over, he added, But when the emperor changes, what will happen to Yeo Jin's trading post in Shandong?
The envoy spoke to His Highness about the trip.
This was also the most discussed issue during this journey. Your Highness,
merchants between Yeo Jin and the Ming dynasty frequently interact with one another, and the lively trade has resulted in increased tax revenue for the Ming court.
His Highness leaned forward to listen. I know about that as well.
Our treasury has seen a significant increase too.
So what are they planning next? The envoy replied. Your Highness,
the new emperor has stated that the trading posts in Zhoujin will be retained,
as they bring immense benefits. However, due to the rising number of pirates,
the Ming army will be deployed around the trading posts to deal with them.
Hearing this,
the officials began to murmur.
Ah. Well, that's good news.
With the Ming army protecting us,
we don't have to worry anymore. Indeed, it's great news. Truly a blessing from above.
No one noticed that His Highness' expression was turning uncomfortable as they continued to chat.
That's thanks to Your Highness' benevolence, said Tao Lon Ji, adding, if that's the case, it will definitely be very safe. Right?
This is truly the grace of the supreme nation.
At this remark, everyone's faces darkened with fear. His Highness, feeling displeased, spoke up. Sometimes I wonder if it is right for me and you to govern the common people. Everyone became fearful,
their faces turning pale.
We truly appreciate Your Majesty,
the officials stammered.
His Highness, now furious, scolded. Appreciate?
Then don't commit punishable offenses like this.
Ta Tuong, do you even know what you've done wrong? Tao Lon Ji, trembling with fear, stammered. I understand my offense. Suddenly, he shouted angrily. You think I would say that? Why is it always just me who faces this? My son is about your age. I'm fed up. I can't take it anymore.
He even lunged toward His Highness in frustration,
shouting, if you can't take it, just strip me of my title. I'll quit and do nothing anymore.
It turned out that all this time, it was just his imagination. He was trying to contain his anger when he heard a familiar voice calling,
Lord. The image of his wife embracing their daughter appeared in his mind. You must endure. Think of your children.
Especially the daughter who is married into Lord Seo's family.
She still doesn't have children and lives in constant worry.
You must bear with it for her sake.
With that thought,
he sighed in frustration. I want to submit my resignation so badly.
After imagining that,
he bowed slightly and whispered,
I am at fault. His Highness, not wanting to listen anymore, turned directly to leave. That's enough. We'll stop here for today. You may all leave. His Highness, in a fit of anger, left,
leaving the officials confused.
What on earth just happened? I don't know either. The time spent in the Ming Kingdom was truly wonderful. The envoy stood up, exhaling a sigh of relief,
and glanced at the other officials who were huddled together,
eager to gossip.
Then he stormed outside,
shouting angrily. What do you think? Do you think I know? Just go back to your residences. Damn it.
Why is the sky so clear today?
At the Eastern Palace. Although no one was seen yet,
the voice of Wai Herong could be heard.
Wow. I didn't expect you to find this.
Yes.
Your Highness. I have indeed found it. Outside the room, the eunuchs could only remain silent, not daring to speak.
The abilities of the royal envoy were truly astonishing.
Thank you, Your Highness. The eunuch, sweating profusely, stammered. Should I report to you? Your Highness? We've been waiting for half a watch already. His Highness, enjoying himself, replied. No need, it's fine. Let's go back. With that, he turned to leave.
At the back door of the Neen Hall,
the guards on duty called out. Lord Ho Fap.
The Minister of the Ministry of Justice is asking.
Is Lord Kong Fan inside? Yes. Vice Minister Truong is inside.
The sound of footsteps echoed as the door opened. Lord Kong Fan asked as the Minister of Justice entered.
Lord Ho Fap. I didn't expect you to come here. I came to ask for your advice.
Lord Kong Fan extended his hand forward.
Please. Have a seat. Thank you. Once seated, Lord Kong Fan inquired. Why did you come here? As soon as he sat down,
the Minister of Justice replied.
You probably know that about an hour ago.
The envoy from the Ming Kingdom returned.
The Minister of Rights,
who is the chief steward of the envoy,
reported back. He began recounting the entire story from start to finish, even mimicking the expressions of everyone involved. And then His Highness got angry and stormed out.
With this situation,
it's hard to see how we can live long. What have we done wrong? These days, all I want is to submit a petition to resign and return home.
I think about that at least 10 times a day. Lord Kong Fan stroked his chin,
contemplating the situation. Well, if it's gotten to this point.
He then stood up abruptly.
Then come with me.
The Minister of Justice,
surprised, asked. Where are we going? You'll find out when we get there. At the Eastern Palace.
Wai Herong was intently looking at his design drafts when he stepped outside to meet an official.
You all have worked hard this time. Go back and rest. Thank you, Your Highness. Suddenly, he glanced toward the door and saw two people talking, causing him to feel suspicious. That person is Lord Dong. What is the Research Institute up to? But isn't the Minister of Justice with him as well? Instead of speculating,
Wai Herong asked directly.
Is that not the Minister of Justice? What brings you to the palace?
The Minister of Justice,
when questioned, broke into a sweat and replied. We came to see His Highness the Crown Prince to ask for his advice.
Wai Herong said.
That's a wise move. Come in first. Is something troubling Your Highness?
Wai Herong sighed.
As expected. But it's understandable for my father to be angry. You are responsible for the country's financial matters. Right? That is correct.
The image of the Crown Prince furiously appeared in his mind.
How can such a thing happen in the palace?
He could only shake his head in dismay. The Minister of Justice lowered his head,
confused, and asked. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Can you tell me what's wrong?
Wai Herong calmly replied. It's simple. If we build an embassy near the Ming Navy base, problems will arise. Hearing this, the Minister of Justice raised his head. How so? Isn't it safer to build it that way? Wai Herong dismissed this idea. The finances of the Ming are leaking out. Aren't they? Even though the number of pirates in Japan has decreased, the threat still exists. Arranging the navy like that will incur significant costs. Do you know where that funding will come from? After thinking for a moment, he answered. From tax revenue. Right? Exactly. Sooner or later, they will raise taxes. However, we don't know if that tax revenue will be used for the navy or funneled into something else. The minister's face turned pale, and he stroked his beard. If that's the case, it will have a significant impact on Roshan's finances. I didn't expect this situation to arise. Wai Herong declared confidently. That's right. We need to send someone to gather more information. There's no reason to block the construction of the Ming Navy base. Instead of blocking, we should assess the scale of the Navy base and estimate the costs that a naval force will incur in a year. We can prepare for these matters in advance. The minister understood. There's no time to admire the situation. Let's get to work. Yes. Your Highness. Thank you for enlightening me. Wai Herong shouted. I've said there's no time. Hurry up. Yes. Wai Herong turned to Lord Young and asked. Do you think the Minister of Justice and the other high officials will argue about my opinion? He replied. Surprised. Yes. I suppose so. If that's the case, then the Emperor will surely become furious. Wai Herong propped his chin on his hand, lost in thought, and said. I still believe that we should combine our opinions with those of the other officials. You're right. Young said, contemplating inwardly. He truly wanted to express that what Wai Herong said was indeed accurate. Everyone should be able to voice their opinions to find the best direction. All of us are equal. We debate to improve, not to win. Yeoshin has advanced thanks to your experiments. I will always remember you as the one who made Yeoshin. Suddenly, his train of thought was interrupted as he thought about his wife and children. Oh. How long has it been since I last saw them? Wai Herong cheerfully asked. Ah. My lord. Would you like to see some things I brought back from the Ming? Tears of joy filled his eyes. Yes. What is it? Just moments ago, he mentioned he had no time. And now he couldn't return. Is anyone here? A hurried voice called from outside. Lord Yu sang. Is everyone there? The Minister of Justice opened the door. But no one was there. Is no one here? Suddenly, the left minister spoke up. Why are you looking for everyone? The Minister of Justice jumped in surprise, asking. What? Is Lord Yu saying here? I thought you resigned. The left minister replied. After that incident, I have even more work to do. The Minister of Justice approached and sat down, saying. Oh. I see. I have something to discuss with you. Before he could say anything, another person walked in and asked. Isn't that the Minister of Justice and Lord Yu saying here? Why aren't you two working? Seeing this, the Minister of Justice called out. Lord Yu sang. He began to speak. Since Lord Yu sang is here, I have something to discuss. The left minister curiously asked. What is it? I haven't been here, so I don't know what's going on. Suddenly, the right minister also walked in, saying. Everyone is here now. Seeing this, the Minister of Justice stood up and invited Yu Sang to join them. They began to discuss. I know why the Crown Prince is angry. The Crown Prince's anger was because, before he could finish, someone else walked in. Is everyone here? Come in. Now let's focus on this matter. The left minister asked. The Minister of Justice remained silent for a moment, then turned to see if anyone else was coming in. Then he began to speak. The Crown Prince was very angry and kicked everyone out. Right? And we have no idea why the Crown Prince is so furious.
But now I know. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. Indeed. It is that matter. So the emperor is angry about that? The Minister of the Interior, confused, spoke up. I haven't said anything yet. Hurry up and speak. I'll remain silent. You continue. As night began to fall, everyone in the room continued their discussion. Indeed. We hadn't considered the issue of costs. So, the Crown Prince is angry because of that? Now I understand why the Emperor is furious. The left minister said. We cannot let this happen again. However, if any of you have issues to present to the Emperor, I will compile them and present them. I understand, he said, falling into thought. This is due to the young Crown Prince's insights. Meanwhile, at the Crown Prince's residence, the eunuch reported. Your Highness, the Crown Prince is here. Let the Crown Prince in. He replied. The Crown Prince stood up and asked. Did you bring the documents? Wai Hyang, holding the documents, said. Yes. Father. I also brought some other books. Oh. Let me see them. The Crown Prince focused on reading the documents Wai Hyang had brought. Suddenly, a wave of energy radiated from him to Wai Hyang. Wai Hyang observed and thought. When Father concentrates on something, he seems to absorb all the energy around him. Is this a state of deep focus? He really enjoys it. Speaking of which, he's so engrossed that he's forgotten I'm here. Father, please don't forget me. 4 watches passed, and the Crown Prince finally lifted his head, only to see Wai Hyang's face buried in the ground. Asleep, he exclaimed. Oh no. He walked over and picked him up. This little guy has gained quite a bit of weight. You're growing up fast. Oh. No, take your time growing up. But still. Grow quickly. The next morning, a figure was seen trembling as he walked. Kim in from Seoul and Un, looking disheveled, sighed. We finally finished organizing the documents. This is really exhausting. Suddenly, someone approached and shouted. You too. Can you stop trembling already? Yes. Sir. I'm in trouble with a subject who has just been exiled to the neighboring palace. The annoying one who was exiled is named Yoongang Google. The place they're discussing is the storage area for exiled documents, right next to the main gate of Pangaksa. Just then, someone rode in on horseback and shouted. Urgent report. At the Crown Prince's residence, the Crown Prince holds a letter in his hand. While reading, he ordered. Quickly summon the minister. Yes. Your Highness. No. Quickly convey my message to the minister. Call the high officials to meet me right now. At the hunting school. The voice of the AI echoed with reactions. Wai Hyang stood before a table laden with guns, discussing with the officials. The military officers from the north believed that the current cannons were more convenient than the old ones. But why? If in the north, we need to improve the wind direction issue. One remarked. We also need to consider the loading time. Suddenly, someone approached and said. Your Highness. Please excuse me. There is an order to summon all high officials to the palace immediately. Wai Hyang was surprised, exclaiming. Right now? What's going on? I see now. Let's go. As they walked, they spoke. I've already prepared everything. Please follow me. This is enough. We'll go 2 at a time, replied one. So they rode off at high speed. As Wai Hyang rode, he pondered the urgent order from his father. What could it be about? After a while, he finally arrived and rushed inside to ask Inner Minister Park. What's going on? The minister, puzzled by his question, admitted he wasn't sure either. I don't know the details. I only know there's an urgent announcement from the north. An urgent announcement from the north? Wai Hyang suddenly felt a chill down his spine. The Minister of Defense behind him spoke up. It surely isn't a trivial matter. Wai Hyang thought sharply, sensing the smell of blood lurking somewhere. The eunuch leaned in to speak to him. Your Highness. I prepared your military uniform. Please change inside. I know. Wai Hyong replied.
And Minister Li Jiang said.
We'll excuse ourselves to the courtyard first. Yes. Wait for you in the courtyard. Wai Hyong glanced over. Thinking that just a moment ago,
he felt a shiver from their murderous intent.
Is this the instinct of a seasoned soldier?
They're always ready to fight as soon as war breaks out.
Inside the main hall, the Crown Prince announced. The reason I summoned you all is that I just received urgent news from the north. While everyone was still confused, two individuals turned with a menacing air. What exactly is going on? At that moment,
the Crown Prince said.
Minister Tan Chin.
Quickly read the content for the officials here.
Yes. Your Highness. As you all know, last year,
Yanju caused a significant upheaval.
And not long ago,
there was a recent chaos.
The reason for this chaos is that too many people from the north have migrated to the south. Additionally, this migration is due to pressure from Tada.
The estimated scale reaches up to 1.000 households.
Wai Hyong, hearing this, thought to himself.
One household of Nuzin has about 10 to 15 people.
So,
that's nearly 15.000.
Right?
Minister Li Jian and General Choi Hyson were conversing. This also means that the cavalry numbers around 10.000 to 30.000.
Calculating like that,
there could be about 3.000 to 10.000 heavy cavalry.
Historically, the Nuzin were not easy to deal with. After conquering the Central Plains and establishing the later Jin dynasty, they caused significant losses to Goryeo and Song,
thanks to their powerful cavalry force that helped them conquer the Central Plains,
inflicting damage on both Goryeo and Song. However,
according to historical records, the Jin dynasty fell due to the Mongol invasions,
which led to its division into 350 different tribes. Due to a semi-agricultural lifestyle, the cavalry force of the Nuzin was very formidable. If that AI could unite these divided people,
they would surely become a very strong nation. But neither the Ming dynasty nor Asen wanted this to happen. The Nuzin tribe was managed through coercion and deception.
Tao Lanjie spoke up, asking,
the Ming cannot possibly be unaware of such a large-scale movement.
Who is leading this?
Minister Tan Chin continued.
It's a person named Li Manju.
What's more concerning is that the Ming allowed the tribes to migrate freely.
This left everyone shocked, exclaiming, what? This is troubling. Tao Lanjie inquired again. Your Highness, may I say this? It's very likely that this is a product of the Ming.
The Crown Prince thought for a moment and replied.
Yes. You make a good point. Given the urgent situation, we need to come up with a solution. Now following the orders of the Crown Prince,
Wai Hyong was still pondering over the Nuzin tribe. The presence and influence of King Taedyeonsei and Lee Seongai must be substantial. Wai Hyong recalled a time when he was browsing the web and saw something.
What's this? The influence of King Taro on the Nuzin tribe?
The Chronicles of King Taro.
Is it really to this extent?
The influence of Lee Seongai is quite insane.
Those red dots represent the tribes under Lee Seongai's command. Uncle.
The names of the Nuzin leaders are all written here.
After the Joseon dynasty was established, the official positions were also assigned to these Nuzin people.
At this rate, he should establish a Nuzin nation instead of Joseon.
It's a pity.
I wish I had studied history more in school.
But with this much knowledge, it's enough. Who would have thought I'd time travel here?
I had tried to look up the chronicles to verify this information. But that was something only a tyrant like Yen Sun-Quan could do.
First, when checking other information,
the influence of Lee Seongai on the Nuzin seems almost accurate.
The problem is that after King Taizo,
the influence of other kings on the Nuzin diminished greatly.
Looking at the current situation, their influence is still weak. Damn it. I can't think of a method at all. What will the outcome be? Thinking this through, he spoke up. Father, can I discuss this?
The Crown Prince agreed.
Of course. My son.
Have you thought of a solution yet? The Crown Prince spoke honestly.
Right now, I'm still not sure. But I think we need to start with the basics. The Crown Prince looked puzzled and asked. The basics? What do you mean? He continued. Yes. Our nation must strengthen its capabilities in military strategies to stabilize internally before we can conquer the Nuzan. The Crown Prince leaned back in his chair, pondering. What's the best way to do that? Inside, Wai Hurong was crying out in frustration. But he maintained a calm exterior. Forgive me, Your Highness. But given the current situation, this is the best way forward. Right now. It feels like we're stuck in a sewer. The Crown Prince pinched his cheek and said. That makes sense. But I don't feel comfortable about it at all. Wai Hurong elaborated. With the current state of our nation, it's very difficult to employ strategies effectively. If we rely on current tactics, we will depend heavily on luck. Tao Lanji thought to himself. The theory sounds perfect. Starting from the basics and putting in more effort is better than relying on chance. He has avoided traps that even extraordinary people might fall into. Wai Hurong presented further arguments. Other strategies are beyond our capacity to implement. No matter how smart the plan is. How can we defeat Shang Yu if we have nothing in our hands? Suddenly, a voice agreed. Exactly. Everyone was taken aback and widened their eyes at the speaker. Tao Lanji realized he had misspoken and quickly covered his mouth. Seeing this, the Crown Prince shook his head in exasperation. He hurriedly bowed his head and pleaded for forgiveness. Please forgive my moment of folly. Your Highness. Forget it. You all see that what the Crown Prince says is correct. Listen here. Plan military reforms and present them to me. We must never neglect the modernization of the nation. Everyone shouted in unison. We obey. Your Highness. Outside, the sky was darkening. Suddenly, the Crown Prince burst into laughter, surprising Wai Hurong. Father, what are you thinking that's so amusing? The Crown Prince laughed heartily and said. Every time I think of Tao Lanji's face back then, I can't help but laugh. I never thought I would see something so amusing from that scrawny old man. He looked up at the falling yellow leaves, reached out to catch one, and said, to be honest, I had intended to delay military reforms for a while longer. I thought if I rushed things, I would just mess everything up. But it seems I was wrong. We need a strong army to prepare for being swept up in the political situation of our neighboring countries. The time has come. Wai Hurong admired. You're thinking this far ahead. Your Highness. 5 days later, in the throne room, a pile of memorials was presented. The Crown Prince exploded in anger, throwing everything aside. Get rid of all of this. The officials were terrified, their hearts racing. In their ears, they could still hear the shout. Poison them all right now. It turned out everything so far was just a figment of the prince's imagination. He closed the memorial, thinking to himself, I really want to do it this way. But as a ruler, I must act properly. After thinking, he asked, is this really the best option? The court officials broke into a cold sweat, bowing respectfully. Your Highness. Left Minister spoke up. Given the current situation of Joseon, this is the best course of action. Exhausted, the prince rubbed his head and chuckled lightly. All right. If that's the case, from today, the Council of Government Affairs and Young Soulrich will be abolished. His words shocked all three of them. And they asked, Your Highness. What do you mean? The prince raised his hand, stroked his chin, and made a decision. Instead, we will establish a new organization. I've decided to call it the White Music Council. This organization will take over the duties of the current Council of Government Affairs. And it will be responsible for. He continued. The organization will consist of 3 prime ministers and the judicial overseer. We'll refer to the 5 members as the 5 courts. I think abolishing the current titles and giving new names would be better. The prince listed. East Scribe, West Official, Central Advisor, South Clerk, and North Overseer. As he stood up, a fiery anger surged within him. swelling like a storm. This way. We'll have control over all 4 directions. Given Ozen's current unfavorable situation, I'll maintain the current number of personnel. The new organization and titles have now been established. Ozen will undoubtedly thrive. Better. Much better. We just need to change the name. Restructure the organization. And reassign personnel. His authoritative words struck the court officials like arrows piercing through each one of them. The prince continued. This is the military reform plan proposed by you. Which I asked about. Given Ozen's current situation, what is the best course of action? If the situation worsens, what will you do then? Would you propose an even worse plan? Then claim it's the best option? Are you sincerely reading the scriptures? In frustration, he stormed out, ignoring the bewildered looks of the officials. All of you. Leave. I'll handle this myself. Left Minister, wanting to say something, sighed and began. Your Highness. Before he could finish, 2 officials beside him covered his mouth with their hands. The prince, with a fierce look, turned back and glared at them, as if he could devour them at any moment, making them tremble in fear. He then turned and walked away. At that moment, Right Minister looked down at Left Minister, who was now kneeling in fear. If you had spoken up this time, you really would have been executed. All he could say was, it's just my habit. Later that evening at the prince's residence, he gazed at the pile of scattered papers on the floor. Deep in thought, he jotted down notes on sticky papers, which he placed on the wall, mumbling, this level isn't certain enough. There must be a better way. The next morning, though no one had appeared yet, the voice of that AI echoed through the room. Vice Tutor. His Majesty requests that you review and supplement this material. In the room, 2 people were talking. Oh. Isn't this the same person who came here 2 days ago? Yes. It's me. I was here 4 days ago as well. Counting today. This is my 3rd visit. Since it's His Highness's order, please prioritize gathering all the scholars. Deep down, the court official thought. This is the 3rd time. The laws and procedures seem fine. But His Highness must have seen something that might become a problem in the future. That afternoon, the chief chef came to summon the prince's office. Your Highness, the wise scholars have sent over the documents. The prince quickly responded. Bring them in immediately. He sighed, drumming his fingers on the paper laid out on his desk. Hesitating slightly. Based on the financial expansion, firepower will be enhanced. And so will the Navy. Through this, we can ensure control of the seas and strengthen the northern defenses. Is this really the best option? Suddenly, a voice called out from outside the door. Your son Hyong is here. May I come in for a moment? Hearing this, the prince stopped. Hyong? Very well. Come in. As soon as Hyong entered, he exclaimed in concern. Thank you, Father. He looked at the prince's face. Worried. The prince rubbed his forehead, showing signs of weariness. I haven't been able to sleep these past few days, thinking about military reforms. Do I look that bad? I asked the court officials for strategies, but what they presented seemed like a joke. So, I decided to handle it myself. Hyun, anxious, reminded his father. Rest is most important. Only when you're healthy can Ozen be at peace. Please take care of your health. The prince smiled and agreed. You cheeky boy. I understand. I did manage to get some rest today. But you didn't come just to remind me to take care of myself. Did you? Hyun then recalled his purpose. I had a small idea about the Newsen people, which is why I came to see you. Intrigued, the prince asked. Oh? What is it? Hyun began to explain his strategy. This recent turmoil was caused by Lemunju of the Newsen tribe. He led his people down the Pressure River Basin. If Lemunju was incited by someone, then things must be quite chaotic around him. Hyun imagined Lemunju as a puppet, controlled by unseen forces. Shouting orders. Charge forward. During that time, we can restore our relationship with the Newsen. I also know that the influence of the Johnsons on them is significant. Not only that, but it seems the relationship between Yeonju and Iajin isn't good either. Why don't we invite the tribe leader to the royal palace and try to ease tensions? The prince fell silent. Deep in thought, Hyang continued. Father. They once served King Taeho. We are his descendants. I'm certain they know of our Razin. The prince. Pleased. Agreed. I must say. Your idea gives me goosebumps. I've also thought about this. Which is why I've already sent someone to monitor the movements of the Newsen tribe leaders. Surprised. Hyang exclaimed. As expected from you. Father. The prince then hinted that Hyang might want to take a look at his own plans. Would you like to review this? He asked. Hyang was intrigued. Is this your military reform plan? Not exactly. The prince responded. The two then began to discuss the plan. Yes. This is the system drafted by the Three Pillars during the founding period. It was passed down through generations by the Three Pillars doctrine. After some back and forth conversation, the prince asked, What do you think? Hyang clapped his hands in admiration. As expected from you. Father. It's just as brilliant as I imagined. The prince remained silent for a moment before saying, Judging by the lifeless look on your face, I'm thinking about cutting the Research Institute's budget. Hyang's expression fell instantly. The prince then added, However, if your plan helps with military reform, I might reconsider and even increase the budget. Upon hearing this, Hyang's mood lifted. And he beamed with joy. You made a promise. Suddenly, the prince called out. Summon the chief chef. Go to the Eastern Palace and fetch new ceremonial robes for the crown prince. And send someone to the royal kitchen. Bring plenty of sweets and tea here. Hyang turned away, filled with excitement. Now's my chance to shine. He recalled the lessons his teacher once taught him. You must remember this. 1. Tongjin. 2. Bohai. 3. Goryeo. 4. Choon. 5. Silla's unification. The answer always lies within the question. Do you all understand? The teacher's words echoed in Hyang's mind as he changed into his ceremonial robes. Yes. Teacher. He thought. His mind still processing the lesson. Thank you. Teacher. During the early dynasty, the fifth rank was created by King Sejong. After he overthrew his nephew Danjong and took the throne, Jeongal referred to citizens, all males aged 16 and up, who were required to perform military service. Officers were selected from the lower ranks, chosen after passing tests administered by experienced military officers. The elite force, Taksu, was comprised of nobles and the children of powerful families, including, of course, the elite shock troops. This system gradually improved, but it wasn't critical, and was eventually completely destroyed during the Japanese invasion of Korea. That was, of course, partly due to King Sunjeon's drastic military budget cuts at the time. When the military system was reformed at the start of the Joseon dynasty, it held strong in the north and maintained control over internal conflicts. By following this path, the dynasty managed to avoid the looming threat of war. To survive the year of Injin, the defense system must be reinforced. Hyang reflected. Even if it means dying to find a solution. King Sejong compiled the training manual after Japan's invasion. Korea then established a group of 3 artillerymen, marksmen, and assassins, along with other smaller groups. But what is that? Is the Trangdung related to the Bibian Ti? What is that anyway? Ah. So this is the effect of cramming too much information. Wait. But he's here. Hyang thought, referring to the source of wisdom and insight. The light of Joseon. His name is King Sejong. And now he's Hyang's father. So when Hyang speaks, his father will surely understand. Thus, the prince and Hyang spent the entire night discussing plans. At one point, the prince asked, perplexed, Separate military positions. You say? But if we do that, what will the civil officials do? Hyang responded. It won't work if only the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Personnel handle the military budget and personnel. What if we let the civil officials oversee them both? The prince paused his writing, looked at Hyang, and asked, would things improve if we separated them? Hyang replied, yes. Only military officials should work with military matters. If we go that route, the military government might return. The prince's expression darkened. Even with me here? Hyang, deep in thought, continued. Yes. That's exactly right. Such an organization existed once. The Japanese Empire. The prince agreed with him. All right. You're right. Plus, there's no guarantee that future generations will grow into great kings. We need to be cautious. Now that the Central Army has taken over certain positions, we should turn to the local military forces. Hyang added. Similarly, at the local level, we'll divide the roles into civil and military officials and have them check on each other. And so, the two of them discussed until morning. The next morning, the chief chef came to summon the prince. Your Highness, it's time for breakfast. The desk was cluttered with papers. The prince spoke. Ah. Is that so? Hyang, would you like to join me for breakfast? Hyang replied. Yes. I'd be happy to. On the table, there were two versions of the plan that the prince and Hyang had stayed up all night to finish. Meanwhile, at the Lee family estate, a young man named Lee Soon-ji sat grinning like a fool. Suddenly, his father barged into the room, startling him. In a panic, Soon-ji tried to hide whatever was on the table. His father entered, already scolding him. Soon-ji, you little rascal. You're neglecting your studies to mess around again. Aren't you? Soon-ji quickly tried to explain. Father, it's not what you think. His father, enraged, shouted. I won't repeat myself. Quickly. Show me what you're hiding. Too scared to resist, Soon-ji handed over the item. Here it is. His father grabbed the book and, seeing its contents, grew even angrier. Math? Again? He held up the book, Heavenly Calculation of India, with a bright smile. Boasting. This time it's about equations and the 9 sections method, which is different from the previous time. Father, these things are particularly difficult. But using this Indian calculation method, it can significantly reduce the time needed for calculations. Isn't that amazing? His father, upon hearing this, scolded him harshly, making him almost burst into tears. You little rascal. How could a Confucian scholar like you get involved in such nonsense? His father continued to complain. You spend your days wandering around, associating with lowlifes. And now you waste your time on these useless arithmetic tricks. Don't you? Soon-ji quickly explained. They aren't lowlifes. Father. They are honest and hard-working merchants recognized by the royal court. They taught me this Indian calculation method. But his father became even angrier. You still don't see your mistake. Do you? A scholar must focus on Confucianism, on academic pursuits. Yet here you are, wasting your time associating with merchants and fiddling with numbers. Soon-ji tried again to make his father understand. But father, arithmetic isn't just a game. Merchants are also citizens of our country. Their taxes are what fill the national treasury. And as a scholar, I must help the people. His father, however, was unmoved and raised his voice even more. You speak well. But a scholar must become a government official. If you don't pass the exams this time, then at the very least, you must take the talent exam. Even if you only ever hold a minor position, you must fulfill your duty. Do you understand? Soon-ji hesitated before responding. Yes. Father. Meanwhile, at the Imperial Council, the prince sat on the throne and spoke. You have all gathered here before me. What is the matter? And why are the Prime Minister and the Ministers of State present? The Chief Minister, on behalf of the officials, stepped forward to report. As Your Highness knows, there have been significant changes in the positions of officials recently. Additionally, due to the newly established system of positions and responsibilities, there is currently a shortage of officials in all roles. The prince stroked his newly grown beard thoughtfully and said, "If the request had been summarized and sent, we might have arranged everything already. But since that didn't happen, consider yourselves lucky. With effort, good results will come." After thinking for a moment, he asked for their opinion. "So, what do you all think?" The left minister replied, "Your Highness, now is the time to recruit talents for the imperial examination. Since this isn't a scheduled exam period, we could hold an impromptu exam to seek out new talents." Upon hearing this, the prince raised his hand and said, "Enough. There is no need to continue discussing that issue." The minister was taken aback, breaking into a cold sweat. "But, Your Highness," the prince quickly explained, "don't misunderstand. It's not that I'm against holding the imperial examination. But the preliminary exams have already been held, and grading is likely underway in the distant regions. Therefore, I intend to discuss appointments and plan for a supplemental exam with you all." The court officials, upon hearing this, were overjoyed. Their eyes widened, sparkling with excitement. And they exclaimed, "Oh!" The prince continued to express his view. "Given the urgency of the current situation, I decided to temporarily cancel the doctoral examination and instead hold a special talent recruitment exam. The most outstanding individuals will be selected to make full use of their talents, not just to work efficiently. Furthermore, the number of successful candidates will be increased by 500. The left minister was left stunned, eyes bulging in disbelief. How far ahead has His Highness thought? Seeing his reaction, the prince asked, with that expression, "Left minister, what do you think of my proposal?" Startled, the left minister quickly bowed and responded, "Your Highness, you are truly wise." The prince smiled and said, "We will discuss the details and candidates for the supplemental exam at the next council meeting. Let us choose individuals who can truly make a difference. Since everyone is here, I'd also like to hear your thoughts on the military reform plan. Who would like to begin?" The officials hesitated for a moment before they all responded in unison, "We will follow your orders, Your Highness." Meanwhile, at the Lee estate, an offering of 8 cups was placed on the altar. The AI's voice could be heard. "Heavenly spirits, earthly spirits, hear our prayer." Sun Ji's mother, hands clasped in prayer, called upon the deities. Meanwhile, his father paced back and forth restlessly behind her. "Please bless our son, Sun Ji, so that he may achieve high results in today's preliminary exam. Heavenly spirits, earthly spirits, please guide him." She then turned to scold her husband, startling him. "Husband, stop making so much noise. Your noise is ruining the prayer's power." He quickly apologized. "I'm sorry." At that moment, someone entered from outside, and the two parents rushed over to greet their son, Sun Ji, who had just returned. "Sun Ji, you're back? You must be so exhausted." "My son. Tired." Sun Ji replied. "Father. Mother. I'm home." Seeing his weary state, his father didn't ask any more questions and simply said, "All right. It seems like you've had a hard day. Go inside and rest." As they watched Sun Ji trudge toward his room, his parents whispered to each other. It seems the preliminary exam this time was very difficult. Since it's a special exam, there wasn't much time to prepare. Once inside his study, Lee Sun Ji wasted no time. He quickly removed his ceremonial robes and sat down at his desk, eager to get back to his books. Days without studying have driven me mad. First, I need to solve this problem. On another day at the throne hall, the prince's voice rang out. "If there are no further comments about the special exam, We shall conclude here. Suddenly, Hyang raised his hand. Your Highness. I have something to say about the special exam. The prince, hearing this, asked. Oh? Then why have you been silent until now? Go ahead. Let's hear it. Hyang began to explain. For this exam, I would like to add mathematics. In the studies of the Imperial Research Institute, many areas require mathematical knowledge. Yet the number of officials proficient in calculations is very small. Immediately, the left minister objected. That's not possible. Your Highness. Even though this is a special exam, it's still a preliminary exam, not an official one. Adding mathematics to a preliminary exam, which is meant to select scholars well versed in Confucian studies, is unacceptable. Hyang narrowed his eyes, thinking to himself. Ah. It's him again. Why does he always have to interfere? The prince stroked his beard, contemplating for a moment. At this point, the Minister of Revenue spoke up. Your Highness. Though it may be presumptuous of me to say, the Ministry of Revenue also needs individuals who excel in mathematics. The Minister of Public Works, standing opposite, asked the Deputy Chief of the Ministry of Revenue. How many people has the Ministry of Revenue added this year? The Deputy Minister responded. We have recruited enough people to meet the requirements. However, most of them come from academies, and their mathematical skills are still quite limited. The Minister of Public Works nodded in agreement. It's the same for us. The technical abilities of our officials are insufficient. So even organizing work schedules keeps them up all night. The Right Minister, standing behind Hyang, added. Your Highness. This is also an issue for the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice needs individuals with mathematical skills to investigate and process criminal cases across the country. Similarly, the Ministry of War requires people who can manage and organize military records and equipment at local agencies. We have to count and recount the number of arrows, organize them, and classify everything. After hearing all this, the prince asked. It all makes sense. But does that mean our erosion is so short on capable people? How have we managed to maintain everything so far? The left minister, visibly flustered, answered. Forgive me, Your Highness. But the problem isn't a lack of personnel. It's a lack of budget. Upon hearing this, the prince clicked his tongue in frustration. Oh. For heaven's sake. He then turned to Hyang and asked. So, how many people does the Imperial Research Institute need? Hyang replied. At least 20 people. Your Highness. The prince raised an eyebrow. 20? Can't they be selected through the talent exam? Hyang hesitated before answering. There is a wide variation in the skill levels of the candidates. The prince, after hearing everything, held his head in frustration and thought to himself. It's true. If someone can pass the preliminary exam, they must be talented. Even from a young age. After a moment of reflection, he spoke up. So, this is how you all feel. Left Minister. Do you still firmly oppose the inclusion of mathematics in the preliminary exam? The Left Minister.